This is how scripts think, logic, control, and decision-making in FileMaker scripting. My name is Mark Baum. I work at Soliant Consulting, where I'm a senior application developer. I also do a little business analysis. I want to get better at that. And I love to do training materials and to speak for people. I used to work at FileMaker, like I said. I worked for 3 years with Jeff Benjamin as in-house developer, and then for 2 years in the marketing department with Ann Monroe. I'm also a musician. I have been writing songs this spring that I'm really excited about, and I also have 2 CDs of Latin American music that you heard perhaps as you came in. So is this session for you? I've been wandering around kind of assessing whether the session was for people, and so far I feel pretty encouraged. If you're interested in learning about scripting, if you haven't done any or very much, but if you've explored the Script Workspace, that would be great. If you've written maybe a script or two, that's also good. This is a conceptual session. I'm not going to teach how to use the Script Workspace. I really just want to talk about strategies towards making simple, logical decision-making scripts. So I'm going to start by briefly talking about why the heck FileMaker scripts. And then we'll talk a little bit about how scripts make decisions, what other things might help scripts to think. And then the second half, hopefully the second 25 to 30 minutes of the session will be demo. We got rowdy neighbors, don't we? Okay. Would you be willing to shout something for me? I don't know what. Like, yay! Maybe we'll do that like every 10 minutes. All right, so what are FileMaker scripts? They provide automation in your solutions. They'll automate repetitive manual tasks that you or your users might perform, or they can enable processes that aren't really possible for human beings, like go really fast or do lots of things. They consist of script steps. There's about 130 or more of those. You may have found yourself confronted with that number and thought, how am I going to learn them all? This session isn't going to help with that much, but I'll talk about it. Some of those are macros. So a macro is a sophisticated process all in itself. If you think of some of the things in the FileMaker menu, like sending an email or generating a PDF, that's a good definition of a macro. Some script steps are almost like programming steps in another language. And those are the ones we're going to focus on today. They allow control of your scripts, how your scripts flow. FileMaker scripts have a start and an end. They're arranged in a list, and they go from top to bottom. Some other ways of programming are not like that. However, that start-to-finish flow can be affected by decisions. So here's a script from the demo file. You don't really have to understand what it is at the moment. I'm just going to show that the flow starts at the top, and it kind of goes along, skips a few things, and gets to the end. This is called procedural programming, where you've got a goal. And it's kind of like a recipe. So how about chocolate chip cookies? This is my favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe. And you can see that you go from step to step, start to finish, just like a script. And you can think of these steps like macros, each step representing a sophisticated process, not just a little atomic decision or flow choice. Scripts run when something tells them to. You know, when I'm making cookies, I don't make them because someone tells me to. I mean, maybe my tummy. But scripts, on the other hand, actually do. So they run when you select them from a menu, or when you click a button in the interface, or when other events trigger them. For example, let's say we're looking at a list layout, and the user switches to a detail layout. That event can trigger a script to run. And it's quite useful because let's say you have a medical system or a financial system that would allow you to log the fact that someone saw the detail on a particular record. Scripts, as we've talked about, can actually have different outcomes. They don't have to go beginning to end, and that's because they can make logical decisions. These decisions can be based on user interaction, like a pop-up dialog box, or they can be based on changes to data. You can ask the question, how are the quarterly financials doing, and do something different with your script as a result to that question. Or they can respond to outside circumstances, such as the day of the week or who the current user is. So that was a quick refresher on what FileMaker scripts are. They kind of resemble recipes. They run when something tells them to, and they can respond to circumstances. So how do scripts actually make decisions? Boolean logic. This is the world in which everything is true or false. Everything, even FileMaker Pro, is predicated on that. And I find that kind of amazing. It's hard for me to visualize how a bunch of true, false, little bits that are true or false can make this presentation happen or allow us to build financial systems. But that seems to be the way the world is put together. In FileMaker Pro scripts, we have conditions which ask true, false, yes or no questions. And that's very important to remember, such as, is today Wednesday? And you determine if the answer to that is yes. Yep, today is Wednesday, last time I checked. And if so, you perform an action or a series of actions in your script. For example, you might run the midweek report. Here's another way to put it. Scripts are triggered by something. Whatever causes the script to run is a trigger. And then actions are what the script does. Conditions are yes or no questions, often related to previous actions in the script, but not necessarily, maybe to outside circumstances, which then feed a decision. If the decision is yes, you perform a subset of actions. If the decision is no, you skip those actions and you move on. But possibly, you do something else instead. Back to the cookies. So let's say we've got the cookies in the oven, and the oven is 350 degrees, and we're beginning the baking process. It's really important to document assumptions like this at the beginning of your script. Imagine just this portion of the process, we're going to write a script for that. Although it's pretty obvious with cookies, scripts kind of all look the same. As you get more experienced with them, you'll be able to detect patterns in them and have some intuition about what they're up to. But you want to front load the scripts with comments at the beginning that orient people and tell them what your assumptions are and what the script context is. You don't bake cookies in the bathtub or the dishwasher. You bake them in the oven. And the same with your scripts. Your scripts have a data context. And if you have a script that is going to process tasks, you don't want it accidentally to be in a data context of users, for example. You might cause a lot of havoc. So let's fill this out for that sub-process of checking the cookies. The trigger is that the timer goes off. The action is that you peek at the cookies in the oven. You ask yourself, do they look golden brown? And if they do, you take them out to cool. Or you don't take them out to cool. But you reset the timer and wait a little longer. Choosing a sub-process like this is really helpful. Just choosing a manageable chunk with a beginning and an end and identifying where it starts and where it's going to go can really help you attack a larger problem. So you think through the steps of that chunk, and maybe you create a workflow diagram to understand how they're going to flow. This can help you find gaps or misunderstandings about the process you want to model with the script. So let's look at the idea of a workflow diagram. Workflow diagrams begin with an initial state and a final state represented with circles or ovals. And then there are squares that represent events, which could be triggers or actions, and these nice blue triangles, which represent decisions. I'm going to fill in a few more actions. And then you add arrows to show the flow of the actions and other events within your process. In the case of the cookies, you start with cookies in the oven. As we said, the timer goes off. You check the cookies. There's a decision. Are they golden brown? If they are, you take them out to cool, and you've reached the final state. Or they're not yet golden brown, so you close the oven, and you set the timer again. You can see that a portion of this workflow is a loop. It's going to repeat and repeat and repeat until that decision is different. That yes possibility is called an exit condition. It's the only way out of the loop. If you're going to set up loops, for example, in your programming, you want to think very carefully about the exit condition, or you might trap people in your loop forever. Because even in this case, don't you think there might be another outcome to this process? I don't know how many times you guys have baked, but when I've baked, I've had a second outcome. So we might ask ourselves, how do the cookies look? Do they look golden brown? Do they look pale and raw? Or do they look terribly burned? In which case, you'd take them out of the oven and throw them on the floor. It's another exit condition, gets you out of the loop, and it gets you the final state of the script, but it's not as a happy a one. However, what I've modeled here isn't Boolean, because it has 3 possibilities. It's perfectly fine to model it this way in your workflow diagram, but it's not going to translate well to FileMaker scripting. So what do? You reframe it as a series of yes and no questions. And you ask each question in sequence. First, are the cookies terribly burned? If yes, throw them on the floor. But if not, check if they're golden brown. If yes, take them out to cool. And if not, you don't really have to test if they're pale and raw. Because you know, let's say we can assume that we've analyzed this enough and we know that terribly burned and golden brown are really the only other 2 possibilities. So we can call this a default outcome and simply say, when those other conditions are false, this one will be true. So how does this actually look in a script? There are 4 logical script steps that allow you to model this. I mean, there's a lot of other control steps, but we're going to start with these 4. The if script step is required in your logical structure. It indicates to the script that it's going to start making some decisions. Remember that scripts normally go step by step by step by step, just from the beginning to the end. Now you're introducing a logical structure which is going to modify the flow. And the way that FileMaker Pro knows you're doing that is with this if step. It also includes the first condition you're going to test. So you say, if the cookies look burned, throw them on the floor. There's also another step that's the else if step. It's optional. You would only add it to your structure if you need to test more conditions. In this case, you do. Else if the cookies look golden brown, then take them out to cool. There's a third step, else, which defines the default outcome. Sometimes you don't need a default outcome. Sometimes you just want to test for something, and that's it. But in the case of the cookies, yes, there's a default outcome. That's when you close the oven door and reset the timer. And finally, there's a 4th step, end if, which closes the logical structure and tells FileMaker Pro that then the script can resume its step-by-step processing. So there is a meta, this is sort of like a meta language attempt at talking about the cookie process with 4 FileMaker script steps. Oh, and I want to say, I do have plenty of material here. So I think I'm going to charge ahead. I'm going to give you my email address. And then also, I'll encourage you to post questions on my session page. And I'll be sure to post every question and my response. But I think for today, I won't take questions during the session. I'm just going to try to get you as much talking and demoing as I can manage. In fact, there's at least another half an hour of material that I've cut, which I'm also going to put on that page, which you may want to explore. So to resume this, you can have one if, right? You need it. It's required. And you can have one end if. Those are like the bookends of your logical structure. You also can only have one else, because there's only one default outcome. But you can add as many else ifs as you need. If you need to test 10 different things, you just do them in order. And you can also think that the conditions that you put, the order allows you to think exclusively. So you could be more generous with your first if statement and then start narrowing down the possibilities as you continue. Because only one of these things is going to be considered true. We'll look at that in just a second. So let's see how this would actually be executed by FileMaker. We're pretending we're the script engine right now, and it's assessing whether the cookies look burned. If that's true, it's going to execute the code following the if step. Then, when that's done, it'll encounter the else if step. And because it's already executed something, it's just going to skip all the way to the end. That's it. It's done with the logical structure. Here's another possibility. It'll start with the if, but that's false. So it'll skip past all the steps that follow that particular condition and evaluate the next. If that one's true, it'll run that code and then skip past everything else in the structure. Finally, If the first one's false, it skips. If the second one's false, it skips. And now, because everything preceding has been false, the default condition is performed. It's always performed when the things before it are false. So there it goes, and the logical structure has been executed. So that was a brief introduction to how scripts make decisions. They're executed automatically. They go from start to finish by default. Decisions change that flow, and any user interaction within that is scripted by you. There are 4 basic logical steps: if, else, and end if. And you can refine your logic in the future. Don't feel like you have to get it perfectly right to start with. It's the same with cookies. Novice bakers just want something to eat, while famous chefs are making endless decisions as they go through the process. I want to introduce a couple other concepts that support decision-making in scripts. It's really hard to actually demo something without touching on these ideas as well. So I'm starting with functions. Functions give back information to your scripts. They let your script ask for information from the results of earlier script steps or information from the outside world. And variables allow your script to remember things. So functions are kind of like your script's eyes and ears. They return a single result. There are over 300 of them, and there's a function reference that will help you figure some of those out, but you may also just have to ask for help from other folks in the community. Many functions have inputs, which are called parameters, and the function's result in these cases are based on these parameters. Some functions have lots of parameters. Some just have one parameter, and some have none. For example, a mixer. You put a bunch of ingredients into a mixer, and you get back one result: cookie dough. So let's talk about a function that follows that pattern. This is the text style add function, which applies styles to specific text. So we give it the phrase, "me want cookie," and then it takes the styling information, and the result is "me want cookie" with bold and italic applied. Other functions are like the oven. You give it one thing, a tray of cookies, and it gives you back baked cookies. The square root function is like that. You give it a 9, and it gives you back a nice crispy 3. And other functions are like the kitchen clock. You don't put anything into a kitchen clock. You just look at it. In fact, there's a function that gives you the current time, just like a clock. I'm assuming it's 9:21. That was my best guess. I'm hoping it's a little earlier, actually. What time is it? OK, pretty good, actually. Oh, that's hilarious. OK, there's another function, which is getCurrentDate, which gives today's date. We're going to get another one. And there's a third function, getUsername. I love this one because it tells your script who's using it, which is amazing, because then you can base decisions in the script on that information and customize the user experience, right? You can actually tailor what your application does to individual people. You could also tailor it to classes of people. You can leverage the security model, find out the privileges different users have, and tailor the experience to groups. With functions, the order of those parameters that are given to the function is key, because that order tells the function what each of the data points means. Going back to this function, if it were in the opposite order, FileMaker would not know what to do with it. And you learn about that order from the function's syntax. If you go to the calculation engine, you'll see a list of the functions, or if you go online for that matter, and you'll see each function with its syntax. And that's just a clue, obviously. You're not going to guess exactly what all the functions do from the syntax, but it gives you a little reminder as you're working as to which data points you need to provide to it. For the function dayName of date, which returns the name of the weekday of a date, we could give it today's date, that parameter, and get back Wednesday, the text. That one's cool because, just as you saw before, you can ask in your script, is today Wednesday? And if so, run the midweek report. So what else helps scripts to think? Variables, which allow your script to remember things. Variables provide a temporary place to store information, sometimes just as long as the script is running, and sometimes until the user closes the application. Or the script might also change the value of these variables as it's running. The point is that variables never last longer than those two possibilities, unlike a field. The whole point of a field is that it stores information for everybody, right? No matter who looks at a field in a table, they're going to get back the same data. But variables have different values for each user, right? So if your script is running, if the script is running for user A, it's going to set variables as in the course of the script. And if user B on another machine is running the same script, it might set those variables to different values. You can think of it sort of like bakers using the same ingredients but getting different results, or bakers making different numbers of cookies. Each user's experience is going to go in a different way, and variables allow you to track that information. Variables reside in the computer's memory, like in your head. So imagine that you're baking cookies, and you put them in the oven, and you're going to remember that it's going to take 10 minutes. And then when you take them out, you forget that. You don't have to remember those 10 minutes for the rest of you. You don't have to put that in a database. You just remember it for the time being. Maybe you burn the cookies and you use a timer. You set the timer to 10 minutes. When the timer rings, it doesn't store the 10 minutes. It's over. Or the oven temperature, 350 the first time you bake the cookies. The next time, maybe you're going to use 400. The point is that variables are forgotten when they're no longer needed. Some of the advantages of variables is that they can make your scripts faster because they reside in memory. I believe this is changing a bit as more and more of FileMaker's processes are being cached, but basically, variables are good in scripts. They're likely they also clarify things visually sometimes. As I said, they're tracked separately for each user, and they don't require a lot of setup. If you wanted to use a field, you have to go to Manage Databases, go to the table, define the field, give it, say if it's text or a date. A variable, you just use a script step, set variable. You give it a name, and you give it a value. We'll talk more about this later. If you want to clear the variable, you use double quotes. That actually causes the variable to be forgotten. It vanishes from memory until the next time it's given a value. There are two types of variables: local, which are the ones that keep their value only while the script is running and have names that start with a single $sign, and global variables, which are the ones that last until you close the app and have names that start with a double $sign. So I'd like to visualize variables for a moment with you. Imagine that your script is a train, and it's running on a certain schedule. And you want to know if it's going to finish early, late, or on time. So the script is starting, and it stores the current time in a variable when it starts. There it goes. Ah. So the set variable command sets the variable start, a local variable, with the results of that function that you saw earlier, get current time. Remember that get current time is going to return different times at different moments. Whenever the script executes the step, it's going to assess what the time is. So, gets to the middle of its journey, and it's going to store the current time again in a new variable, middle. Exactly the same script step, just a different variable name. This allows you to compare the two values and decide if the script is on schedule, and maybe take an appropriate action. Maybe skip a chunk of code, or a train might take a shortcut. So there it goes again. And it's storing the current time once more at the end of the line. It's the same command, just with a different variable name. And now you can compare them and see if the train is on time, and again, take an action. Now when the script ends, goodbye script, the variables end too. Goodbye variables. And that's local variables. Now let's look at global variables. Imagine that you're running multiple scripts. Remember that for local variables, if you have them in a script, they're going to vanish when the script is done running. But if you want to count up how many iterations of a script are finishing late, early, or whatever, then global variables are what you need. So let's say script 1 is running, and whee, there it goes. Looks like it's going to be late. Yep. So it sends a value to a global variable out in space, totally detached from the script. Same script step, different variable name with 2 $signs. And it's the value, just the number 1. Now, the script ends, but the variable does not. It's still out there in space. Here's the next script. Whee! I think it's going to be early. Yep. So this time, it's going to write to another variable, early count. Same script step, different variable name. When the script ends, both variables are now in memory for that instance of FileMaker Pro. Let's run one more script. There it goes. And it's late again. What's cool with this is it can write to the existing global variable, even though it's a different instance of the script running, because the variable's still there. So I'm going to write to it. I'm going to increase it by 1. And the command would look like this. I give the variable name. It's already an existing variable. I get the value that's in the variable, and I add 1 to it. And the script ends, and the variables are still there. You could use them for reporting or for some message to a user or for some kind of decision you need to make. You don't want to use global variables that much. And this slide is a little, it's going to kind of go into things that I'm not going to explain completely. But global variables are great for tracking information about the current user. Like when the application starts, you could store a bunch of user information in them. They're good for displaying calculated text on layouts when you need to clean up a bunch of merge fields or when you want to show the progress of a long-running script. And they're good for passing information between windows or toggling features. I'm going to show one of these. Developer debugging dialogues. I'm going to show you that very briefly. Or when you want to turn on and off custom menus or script triggers. But there are good reasons not to use global variables. If you have a series of scripts, and each of them is referencing a global variable by the same name, what if you kind of forgot and used it for something else, right? One of your scripts is, you just forgot that you've got this global variable out there that a number of scripts are using, and one of your scripts modifies it in a way that's unexpected. It's very hard to track that down. It's hard to reproduce the behavior, and troubleshooting can just make you tear your hair out. So you want to be very conservative in your use of them. They also clutter up what's called the data viewer, which I'm going to demonstrate later. It's a tool for viewing the values of variables and fields as your script is running. And they kind of require less discipline. When you know that a variable is going to be cleared by the end of a script, it forces you to attempt other techniques. And without the discipline, your scripts can be harder for other people to understand. And the fact is, you want to ask yourself each time when faced with a question between the two variables, choose local whenever possible. Variable locally, I didn't come up with a slogan before the show, so I can't think of what it is. Variable locally, pass information between windows globally. OK. So that was what helps scripts to think in other ways. We talked about functions, which give a single result, have specific syntax, and can take many parameters or none. And they're kind of like the mixer, the oven, or the clock. And variables, which store information temporarily, can be local or global. And they're like the timer setting, the mixer speed, or the oven temperature. So now, I'm going to get into the demo. And I think we're 25 minutes-ish. I'm wearing this jacket because I've had a cold all week, but I'm getting warm now, so I'm going to take it off. OK, let's go. I have just the right amount of time. So I'm going to switch over to the computer. And we'll just see how much we get through. Again, it's all in the demo file, so whatever we don't get, I'll make sure you have access to. All right. I thought I was going to use Command Option Tab to switch between things, but it doesn't want to do it. So I'm going to show you my ugly slides. All right. So let's switch over to the database itself. I'll make this a little bigger. So I took one of the starter solutions, the task management system, and made a few modifications to it for this. It doesn't matter that much, the functionality of this. The point is that it's got a list of tasks which have been categorized and given statuses. But what we really want to do is look at the Script Workspace. And actually, I do want to show you just a handful more slides. So let me go back there for a second. Here we go. How do you write logical scripts? Here are the steps I want to talk to you about. We already talked about creating a workflow diagram and then using comments to outline what the script will do. You could write some steps on a piece of paper, but FileMaker Pro scripting actually allows you to have steps that just let you type whatever you feel like. Then, based on the comments you've written, you build a logical structure that follows what you've already sketched out in your mind. And then you fill in the actions the script will perform and step through the process using a tool called the Script Debugger. I want to just give you a little bit of background on this first demo, deleting a record. FileMaker Pro has a default confirmation message whenever you delete a record. You've probably seen it. It says, permanently delete this entire record, and then lets you choose between delete and cancel. But wouldn't it be nice to have a more customized confirmation message that names at least the thing being deleted? I mean, I'm not trying to diss the default message. It's perfectly appropriate for a default that has to work for every table and every record. But once you start scripting, you can start making choices that are a little kinder to the user. So you could say, would you like to delete this task, for example? This improves the user experience. It gives them a little more confidence in the choice that they're making. And the first step would be to create a workflow diagram. I think I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this diagram, but the point is here that the user is asked whether they want to delete a task, and then either the script deletes it or not, and it gives a confirmation message if it does. Here are some comments that you might outline the script. We'll look at those live. But this is where I want to take a moment before we move on. When you build the logical structure, there's kind of an information gap here, right? I'm not talking about calculations today. And it's going to take time to translate the decisions you want your scripts to make into actual calculations. So a good place to start is the fundamentals of calculations in the same room right after this. And then there's a number of online resources as well. The same gap applies when you start to fill in the actions, because there are those 130 script steps. So I just don't want to be kind of doing smoke and mirrors today as I make those choices. I want to acknowledge that there's some learning to do once you're filling in these structures. It's great to go to the online help for this, to go to the FileMaker community, or just ask people at DevCon or within your local community if you have a user group. Finally, here's a picture of the Script Debugger, which we'll use. OK, so now we're ready to switch. And I'm going to go to the Script Workspace. Zoom in a little bit. How are we doing for zoom at this point? Is that enough? Can you read the words there yet? Holler. Yes or no? OK. Great. So here are the comments that I've written. I've written that there's a trigger, what the trigger is that makes this script run, which is the user clicking the trash can button on the task list layout. And then I've kind of outlined action, condition, and decision, like what I wrote earlier on the slides. The action is that the script asks the user a question. The condition is the question that it asks. And the decision are the outcomes that can result from that question. But what if I wanted to add other comments? You can see over here, I'm going to do just a little Script Workspace stuff. There's a bunch of choices for commands. And I can even filter them down and type comment. Oops, if I can type. If I type comment, it'll filter it down to just a couple. I can double-click on that script step. And voila, I have a comment. And in fact, I think I want to type one, context. And I'll say it's the task table. Oop. So now I have another comment. And now I can drag and drop that up to the second line. And I've added a comment to my script. I'm feeling tempted. There's just something occurring to me. There's a little song. I promised myself I wouldn't sing this year, especially since I had a cold, but also I was going to restrain myself. But I have the first line of it in my head. It kind of goes, let's see. My friend the workspace, my friend the workspace, lets me click and drag and drop. And then, or I can type in another script step. I can script and never stop. There we go, yes. Okay, live coding and lyric writing. Okay, so here we are. The next step, now that you have an outline of comments, is to do your logical structure. So I'm going to just do, I said I could double click, right, or I can type. I'm going to type. So I'm going to type if, and I get both the beginning and the end, right, the bookmarks of my structure. And I can actually type a double line to put comments inside here, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say if yes wants to delete. This is like a placeholder. And then I'm going to add an else statement. And I think that's the structure I need here. I'm going to drag in my first yes comment and drag in my no comment. Maybe I'm going to get rid of these spaces just to make it easier to read. So you can see that now I have a logical structure. If they want to delete, then it's going to go delete it and show the success dialog. Otherwise, I know they don't, and I'm going to do nothing. So now that I have a logical structure, I think the next thing to do is to add, I've got to add an action because I believe that this condition is going to be predicated on that action. Sometimes I said that decisions are made based on previous actions in a script, sometimes outside circumstances. This is one of the times when it's a previous action. So I'm going to add a show custom dialog, right? This script step allows you to do your own dialogue. So I'm going to give it a title of please choose. And would you like to delete this task? And then down at the bottom, I have two options, OK and cancel, given to me by default. I'm going to change that. I'm going to cancel the first one because deleting is kind of heavy duty. And then I'll make the second one. And you can see it's putting it into quotes for me because these are literal words. And I make the second one delete. I could actually have a third button. I could have a, I don't know, a maybe button or something. But that's not very useful, so I'll get rid of it. But if I put that maybe, then there would be three buttons, right? Cancel, delete, and maybe. If I get rid of it, there are just going to be two. Let me zoom out for a minute so I can show this. And you know, I think I actually made a window just to remind us what we're talking about. So this is the dialogue that's going to be produced, right? That's the title I gave it. This is the text I gave it, more or less. And these are the two buttons. Now, having asked this question, there's a function I can use to get the result, what the user said. And that function is get last message choice. If we go back to this, each of these buttons is associated with a number. The default button is associated with the number 1, button 2, the number 2, and button 3, the number 3. And that's the result given by this function. Oops, well, we can be here. This is the calculation dialog. So if I say, you know, actually I want to be out of here because I want you to see the whole context of the script. There's another Script Workspace mechanic that I don't want to get into too deeply. But you can type in your conditions right here in the line, or you can click this little blue thing to open up the calculation dialog, and you have more access to reference stuff from FileMaker. But I want to stay right in here, if I can manage not to click anything. I'm going to put a 2, because button 2 is labeled delete. Is that clear? So now, when the user chooses button number 2, this will execute. And if they don't choose number 2, this will. I'm done with my logical structure. So I'll save my script and do the next step. The next step in the process is to add my actions. I've already added one action because I needed it for the logical structure. But the next action is to delete a record. And then I think I want to add another custom dialog. This may annoy some users, but as you are starting your scripts, it can be helpful to add a success dialog. Something like record deleted. The record was deleted. And in this case, when the user sees this dialog, they have no choice to make. So you just give them an OK button, and then they'll be like, OK, I understand, it got deleted. And I think I want to add another one down here in this do nothing area to say that the record was not deleted. Again, a lot of users don't want to see this. It's occasionally, as a developer, I get asked for these. So it really depends on people's comfort level with how much they trust your system. But at this point, because you're writing the script and you don't have the users yet, you're in test mode, you get to put all the confirmation messages in that you want. So I want to show you what this script does so far, with a special attention to this. Script steps, like functions, you know how functions have parameters, and they can have lots of parameters, or one parameter, or none? Script steps are kind of the same way. Some of them have options. This is an option. And the custom dialog has lots of options. If I set this with dialog to off, then how do I put this? The delete record step is exactly the same step that you see in the menu, right? So when you run it in your script, it's going to do all the same stuff. It's going to show that default confirmation dialog that we're trying to replace. But if you change this to off, it won't show it. I want to show you what it's like when it does show it. So let's actually just run the script as it is. So I'm going to say yes. Here's my nice custom dialog. I'm going to say delete. And then it asks me the question again. Do I really want to delete it, right? And if I say cancel, it even says, it's been canceled. Do you want to this is a terrible user experience. So let me go back to the script and turn it off. And let's try it again. Now it asks me if I want to delete it. And if I say delete, it's deleted. And let me do it again. Oh, and I didn't tell you something. Here in the Script Workspace, there's a little triangle that's like a play button on ancient tape deck. Or, God, what else doesn't exist? An iPod? So you click it, and it runs the script. If you click cancel, it says it wasn't deleted. So you got your two confirmation messages, right? Now I'd like to show you the same thing using the script debugger that shows the flow of the script. So in this case, and I didn't need to open it. I have the habit of going to open it from the tools menu, but there's this cute little ladybug. And she's just like the play button, except that she runs the current script, the one that you're working on, in the debugger. So let me zoom in a little bit now. You can see that the debugger shows you the script executing on a step-by-step basis. It skips comments and it skips blank lines. So that's why it's already all the way down to step 5. And I have a bunch of options up here. I don't want to go into all of them. But this one here lets you, actually, both of these let you step one step at a time into the script. They give different, there are nuances to them that we don't need to discuss today. So I'm going to use this one. And I'm going to click into it. And it asks me, do I want to delete the task? I say delete. And now I'm at the logical structure, and I can see it working. So I'm going to step forward. We said delete, so we believe that the last message choice was 2. And in fact, it was. So it's deleting the record, and it's showing the custom dialog. So that's a great confirmation that your script is doing what you expected, and you can see the flow of the logical decisions. Now, I would like to, let me zoom out, and I'll go ahead and close this. Go back to the workspace. I think what I would like to do now is add a local variable. Right now, we are showing this custom dialog. They're making a choice, and we're testing the choice right here, right? Let's add a local variable using that set variable command. And I'm going to call that, I'm famous for big, long variable names. I'm going to call this choice underscore, cancel, and then delete. And what that means to me is because I'm going to set this variable to the last message choice, The name of the variable actually tells me that this variable contains the choice the user made to a user dialog, and that button number 1 is cancel and number 2 is delete. So that when I counter it in the script, I know immediately what it's doing. And right now it's right next to that, and I can go open it up and I can go figure it out. But what if I actually use this variable multiple times in the script? I don't have to go higher up to go figure out what I was thinking. Having set this variable, I'm now going to use it down here. Remember, it's containing this value. It's capturing this value at a given moment in time. And now I'm going to just use the variable instead. Choice, oops, cancel, delete. Oops, there we go. Beautiful. So let's watch that in action in the debugger. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to click the ladybug. And then I'm going to open another tool, the data viewer. And it's going to show me what's happening in my variables. So I'm going to step forward. This time I'm going to say cancel. I encounter the set variable command, and voila, the variable shows up in the data viewer, and it tells me the value it has. Now, I can correlate the value in the variable with what's happening in my logical structure. I don't have to intuit it by watching what the logical structure does. I can say, oh, you know what? I made a mistake. Let's fix that. I saw some puzzled expressions out there, and it made me think. My original statement here, I'll just pull these out of the way for a second. Choice cancel delete needs to equal 2. Right? That was the original condition. Is the last message choice 2? OK, let's try them again. So I'm going to click on the ladybug, watch the data viewer, and go on down. We're going to say, I'm going to cancel. And there's the variable with the value 1. And because the variable has the value 1, it's going to skip the first section, because it was testing if it was 2. And now it's going to run the default, because it's not 2. And there it goes. And I'm going to say OK. Super. Let me close that again. Having done that, it's so exciting to have variables. I'm going to add another one. I'm going to add an if condition here. Up. And I'm going to say, I have to remind myself, debug mode, I think it is. I'm going to make a global variable called debug mode. And I'm going to wrap that if statement around that really inconvenient, annoying record was not deleted message. I'm doing this because I want to have a global variable that just floats in space and tracks whether I want messages like this to be displayed. I can actually just say, while I'm working with the database, it's going to show me these confirmation messages that give me clues about how things are working. But when the user is using it, it doesn't. Right now, that variable doesn't exist. Right? If we looked at the data viewer, we wouldn't see it. So we need a script to populate it. And that's what this script is here. So let me zoom in on it. Oops. There we go. And it's quite simple. FileMaker Pro allows you to refer to variables that don't exist yet. Some programming languages are much stricter than it is. So I can literally say, if this variable that doesn't exist is empty, that's what these double quotes mean, then give it a value. Use the set variable step to make that global a value of 1. However, if it already has a value, then clear it. Make it empty. So this is a toggle script. It takes a variable and switches its value off and on. Let's watch it in the data viewer for a minute. So let's see. I've got the debugger. And I'm going to open up the data viewer, pull it over there. And let's step forward. Oh, I went a little too fast. But you saw that, I hope, that it found that it was empty. And so it assigned it a value. And as soon as it did, the data viewer showed me the global variable. And watch, as I continue through this script, it skips the other part of the logical structure. And then the script ends. But the global variable is still there. And I can refer to it in another script. And the script I'm going to refer to it with is the one we've been working on. Right? Oops, let me close this. Down here. Now I have that variable populated. Let's see what this script does. So I'm going to open it up in the debugger, maybe open the data viewer again, and step through. I'm going to say cancel, step down. As you can see before, it's going to skip the first one because it's the choice cancel delete is 1. And now I'm here. And because debug mode is 1, it's going to give me my custom debugging message, right? But if it was cleared, which could be true for your users, they would never see it. And this is a technique, even though we all have the debugger, even advanced programmers will bury messages like this throughout their code if they need a very specific way of seeing what's going on in their scripts. So I believe, where are we at for time at this point? I think we're getting close. Oh, well, hot damn. You know, there was a little more I wanted to show you, and I might do that. Here we go. That makes me really happy. Because actually, this is a really important thing to consider. So now we've got a delete script, right? And we're throwing it to our users, and they can delete all they want. They can decide to delete or not to delete, but they can delete all the tasks in the database if they got really excited about it. And maybe that's not such a good idea. So I'd like to add some validation at the beginning of our script that prevents them from deleting tasks unless they have specific status. Let's propose that tasks can only be deleted if they have a status of draft. If they're already in progress or they've been completed, they shouldn't be deleted. So I'm going to take exactly the same approach as I did to start a script to add this functionality. Zooming in a little more, here you see the rest of the script is the same. But I'm treating this section of the script with the same strategy. I'm starting with just comments. I'm listing my condition, which is to check whether the task has a status of draft, and then my decision. If it's draft, it's OK to delete. Otherwise, don't delete it. Then I'm going to build my logical structure. And I think I'm just going to Julia Child this so we have a little time at the end. Here what I've done is I've added an if, an else, and an end if. The condition is the field task status have the value of draft? If so, there's really nothing to do, because we want actually to do nothing here, finish the structure, and continue. But here is where we're going to take an action. So the next step is to add some actions. I'm going to give a message to the users, because it would be really mean to just sort of prevent them from deleting and not tell them why. So I'm going to add a message saying, you can't do this. You can't do it unless your task has a status of draft. And then I'm going to exit the script. So this is another control step. And what it does is it acts as though that step-by-step-by-step execution has reached the end already, and it just jumps out of the script. So if the status is draft, nothing happens, and it jumps to the end of this, and it continues. If the status is not draft, it shows a dialog, and then the script stops. No deleting for you. So I'd like to see how that looks in the data viewer. So I'm going to back up just a little bit and click on the ladybug. All right. And I don't know what the status is of my record by looking at the layout, but check it out. The data viewer is already telling me. That is the value of the field for the current record I'm in. And maybe I should clarify that. I guess I'm gonna close all this stuff, or yeah, I'm gonna do it. So here we go. I just want you to see the layout for a moment. Oops, and then I ran it. I should tell you about that too. So here we are in the layout, in the list layout, list view. I'm currently on this record, and you can see that the status is pending. The status up here is draft. Maybe we'll actually go up there first. So let's go up to this record. Let's make that one current. Back to the script. Back to the ladybug. Let's open up the, here we are. OK, now you can see that it tells us the status is draft, and that corresponds with what we saw visually in the record. And what I did a minute ago that I sort of groaned about was that when I wanted out of the script debugger, I closed the red X, rather than hitting the stop. When I click stop, the script stops. It's just like an exit script command. But if I click this, it's thinking, oh, I don't need to debug anymore, and it runs through the rest of the script. And sometimes that's really not something you want to have happen. So it's a good habit to acquire to use that stop button with consistency. So I'm going to open it up again and get the ladybug, and we're going to step through. So here we are at the first step that's executable, and we know it's draft, so we know it's going to, what did I hit the, oh, I know. So I did nothing wrong. It's just confusing. What happened was that, and it's kind of hard to show you without, let's see. And I have to actually answer. So let's say I say cancel. OK, then I really have to go up. And I have another dialogue. I can't talk about this. We're going to have to go back to the beginning. So, OK. But this is actually a really good piece of information. So let me get this out of my way so I can start this again. When you have nothing in here except a comment, right? There's nothing in here. There's no dialogue. There's no exit script. There's just a comment. Even though this is true, it's going to look like it skipped it when you're debugging, right? And that still confuses me sometimes, and I imagine it may confuse you too. It's going to look like it skipped past it because nothing happened. And then it's going to get to this condition, and you're going to know that it did it right because it's going to skip this part too, right? So if the value is actually draft, it's going to go wee, and you're going to be like, but wasn't it supposed to do something? But the answer is no. And then it'll skip down here. So let's try that again, just so you can see it in action. It's draft, and whoop, all the way to else, and then to the end of the structure. And you can see, as it is there, that the status is draft. Let's see what happens if it's not draft. So I'm going to change to this one, go down here. This time, it showed the dialogue, and I'll say OK, and it quit the script right there. Right? It didn't perform any of the rest of the script. I'm going to show that one more time, just because it goes by kind of quickly. And also, I'm not very zoomed in, so let me do that. So right now, the status of the record we're viewing is pending. We can see that in the data viewer, so we can correlate it with what's happening in the debugger. It's going to skip this part of the structure because it's not draft. And it's going to skip past the comment. It's going to go straight to the custom dialog. And I'm going to run that. I'm going to say OK. And then it's going to run there's all this other script stuff, all these steps down below. But it's going to skip them all because it's going to exit the script. So that's what I wanted to show you in terms of FileMaker functionality. So let's take just a second or two to return to the slides. I don't know what happened to me with my Command Option tab, but there we are. Here we are. And I'm going to our recipe is complete. I do hope I didn't throw too many cookies on the floor. And I want to review the process. You create a workflow diagram, use comments to outline what the script will do, even if you're adding a feature to an existing script. You build your logical structure, fill in the actions, and then step through the process, looking at values in the data viewer. In the demo, I displayed custom confirmation dialogues. I added a local variable. Then I added a global variable. I talked about using your own little dialogues for the debugging process, using a global variable as a sort of a toggle. And then we looked at the importance of validating actions like deleting. So if you have questions, this is my email address. I would really love to hear from you. I apologize for not making time for it now. You can also post questions in the DevCon community on my session page. And I have been working on this to the last minute pretty obsessively. So I will be making updates both to the slides and the demo file by August 1st, including extra material that I didn't cover. And I really hope that you'll take some time to look at it and play with it and see if you can use it for your own